So welcome everyone to this beautiful sunny day if you're in the UK, and thank you for joining us. My name is Dawn Davies. I am the head buyer for the Whisky Exchange and general booze hound. Drinks been my life for the last 20 years, and I have to say I keep learning, and agave spirits are definitely something I have a really big passion for, but I still don't know a lot about them. And the first time, I think everyone remembers their first kind of meeting with tequila, or maybe they don't remember because it went horribly pear-shaped. But I think sort of mezcal and tequila have had a sort of bad rep for a long time because everyone thinks of tequila as being with lime and salt, taking a really bad tequila in a bar where you're doing shots. Mezcal's just seen as something that has the worm in it, and it's been a sort of really big misconception around all agave spirits. But for me, there's sort of the one spirit besides maybe some cane rums that really, really, really do have a sense of place. And I remember when I first tasted mezcal, and it was I was about 20 something, so a long time ago, and I was in Mexico with my best friend, and we were doing 5 weeks traveling in between sort of university terms. And I remember we went up into Oaxaca, into this village, and we were watching this amazing parade and all these beautifully dressed people in bright, colorful shirts and dresses, and suddenly the heavens just opened. And I mean, this was the most torrential rain ever, and we were sheltering under a truck with this little kid because you had to get away from the rain. And we came out and we were absolutely sopping wet, and we were just in like our t-shirts and our shorts, and we went into this little kind of shop that was selling clothes just to try and buy something that was something warm. And this woman gave us this little kind of clay pot with this liquid in it, and we just thought it was tequila. And she gave it to us, and I just suddenly had a moment when I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And it was mezcal, and I just remember thinking, this is fantastic. This is it. I'm happy. I'm in heaven. And so that was kind of my first impression of mezcal. And I think when you look at agave spirits, because they're plants, they're grown in the soil, and the soil gives character to things, and especially anything that's like a grape or agave. And I think that's what makes it so exciting, is that you can really taste where it's from, and and the actual plant that it comes from, the different styles. So for me, who I'm a wine geek first and foremost, this is as close to wine as I'm going to get. So this is probably naturally my home spirit with rum. So agave, what is it? Well, it's actually from the lily family, and most people think it's cactus, but it's not. Even though I have plenty of cactus around me, I do not have any agave, sadly. And I think for me, if you look at sort of the different sort of the history, let's say, of agave in Mexico, actually it's a very long history. It comes back from the time when they were making what we call pulque, which is just this sort of low wine, just fermented agave mash, and it was kind of quite gloopy and syrupy. And then when the Spanish, well, there's two theories. It's either the Spanish or the Filipinos, when they came to Mexico, they actually brought distillation with them. And they think that this is where then the tradition of producing agave spirits in Mexico started. And then sort of as the history went on, and you have the Mexican, well, the Spanish actually prohibited the production of agave spirits. And that was because they wanted to sell their Spanish brandies and wines, and they didn't want to have these locals drinking their kind of distillate, their homebrew. And it wasn't until really the Mexican Revolution where they really sort of captured this idea of the mezcal and tequila being that national spirit. And actually, this is really where mezcal and tequila kind of split off. And it was definitely around this time that tequila very much was the drink that the soldiers drank, and it was all, gave them courage, Dutch courage, but Mexican style. And and so now sort of we go on to today, and we've really seen this sort of increase in tequila production, especially tequila in America is super popular. And now they both tequila and mezcal and a couple other agave spirits have their own what we call DOC, so denomination d'origine, which basically protects themselves. Because actually agave spirits are produced around the world. I've just bought one from South Africa. I mean, the South Africans have been distilling agave for a while, which is really, really interesting. So it's a plant that's not just local to Mexico. So, tequila and mezcal, these are the two, or destilado, destilado de agave. These are the ones we're going to focus on today. And as I said, agave comes from a lily family. And with tequila, you can only use blue agave. And with mezcal, you can use up to, as many different types of varieties you want, but mainly 50 are used today, even though there's, I think, around, I'm going to try and remember this, about 600 different types of agave plants out there, which is just insane. But yeah, as I said, for mezcal, only 50 really used nowadays. But for tequila, it is 100% blue agave. If it says on the label 100% blue agave, nothing else can be added. There are these ideas of sort of what we call tequilas, which don't have 100% agave on them. If you see that on the label, they can have up to 49% of another sugar-based distillate. So normally a cane distillate or corn distillate is used to be mixed into them. So they're sort of known as mixtos. But if you see 100% agave, it's got to be 100% blue agave. So tequila Weber blue agave. And the thing that's really amazing, I kind of always, when I look at spirits, I often go back to wine because, they're all the same stuff. It's all fermented stuff. And if you look at a wine plant, a grape vine, you have to, before you can harvest, it's 3 years minimum. And vines go for like 20, 30, 40, even 100 years. And, the older they are, the seen as better they are. Now, agave, it's 8 years minimum. For some of these plants, it's 10, 15 years. That's amazing that they have to wait that long to even begin to harvest. And I think it's really, for me, that's where you get that time that the agave can take in what's happening in the soil in the same way as a vine does. It has time to really capture the land that it's growing on. And so if you kind of look at Jalisco, which is the area where tequila is produced, and you've got the Tequila Valley, that's sort of more sandy soils. And then you have the highlands where you have altitude and more clay soils. Actually, the styles of tequila from those two areas do differ. So you're going to get sort of fresher, sort of more citrusy, sort of earthy tequilas from Central, and then the fruitier, kind of more lower sort of pH tequilas from the highlands. And that's all to do with the sort of the temperatures and the soil types. That's amazing. That's great. That's terroir. I'm happy. We can finish there. That's a little bit about the agave plant itself. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Please just ask, and I will stop and answer anything. So I don't want to talk too much without having a drink. I was going to make myself a margarita, and then I discovered I had absolutely no curacao or anything that would vaguely do for Cointreau. So I gave up on that idea, and I thought I'll make a Tommy's margarita. And I apparently have no agave syrup either. So I had limes and tequila. So I thought, okay, I'll just drink neat tequila. Fair enough. The other thing I really, really love that I'm a huge fan of is mezcal and tonic, which is just the most gorgeous drink ever. Sadly, I also have no tonic. I think I'm the only person in the whole of the UK who does not have tonic based on our sales, but I'm not doing very well today. And I don't even have any pink grapefruit to make a Paloma. So we're out of luck. So it's neat or nothing. Right. So you have the agave plant, 8 years. Then they have to be cut. So this is done by absolutely skilled labor, a humidor, who the tradition is that it goes down family to family. It's generations they've been cutting these agave plants. And it's really skilled back-breaking work. And, they have to basically chop off all the leaves. So you're just left with the piña. The piña is like the heart of the agave plant. And it looks a little bit like a pineapple when it's cut down. I'm sure you've all seen beautiful pictures of the agave plant being cut and what's left. So then what happens is they're taken, and to release the sugars, so to release the fructose, you have to heat the agave plant. So in tequila, which we'll talk about first, and then I'll go on to talk about mezcal afterwards. So at the moment, what I'm talking about is just the process for making tequila. They have to be baked, essentially. So these are done in either an autoclave, which is a pressurized steam cooker, or in a brick oven. And, you know, that is going to probably maybe change the flavors a little bit. That's a little bit kind of debated at the moment. But a lot of people say that the brick ovens are better because they heat them slower. So it's about 72 hours in a brick oven, whereas an autoclave would be about 12 hours. And that cooking temperature and time, and it makes sense because you're releasing the sugar slower, potentially creates a more complex tequila. So once you've got that, you soften that the agave plant, the piña, and doing that, you're releasing the sugars, you're softening it so it's easy to crush, and you're getting flavor starting to come out. So then you're going to mill it. This can either be done in a Tahona, which if you've ever seen those big sort of concrete wheels and the romantic picture of the horse or the mule sort of pulling it round, and these big pits. So it can either be done like that, it can be done using sort of a roller, or it can be just crushed, which is sort of the most kind of unromantic way, and not used, luckily, unless it's with really big, high volume tequila production. So once you've got that, you've got your agua de miel, your honey, the sort of syrup, which you're going to add water to because you need the water to help it start fermentation because it's quite high sugar levels. So you need to bring the sugar level down so the yeast can start to work. Now, yeast, as maybe some of you, if you've heard any of my sort of talks before, I'm a little bit obsessed by yeast because yeast is the creation of life for me in spirits, and it's where you get the most flavor from. Now, a lot of people use yeast that are sort of high volume, just brewer's yeast that are really kind of generic. But a lot of people in Mexico, especially when you're making mezcal, use natural yeast. And these natural yeasts, there's loads of different yeasts that are sort of working on the product. So it then really just gives you so many more different flavors and so exciting, natural yeast. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I go into the mezcal. So once you've got that, you've got your wash, you've got the yeast starts to work, and you get a low ABV 3-4% wine. Then what happens is it goes into be distilled. So the distillation in Mexico can be either pot or column when it comes to tequila, and there's a load of different styles of still, and of course each distiller will do his own mix or blend or whatever. So it's fermented normally, well, by law 2 times, and then some people do maybe a third, but often it's just 2 distillations just to get that ABV up to about 55%. Then it is watered down if they want, or you can keep it up, but most tequilas are around sort of 40% you find out there on the market today. So I think it's time to taste something. What do we think? Right, so let's look at the first style of tequila, because there's 3 types mainly, 4, sorry. So you've got your Blanco, also can be called Plata, and that's really your unaged tequila. That is something that's sort of off the still, maybe it's rested for a little bit, 6 months, but this is where you really get the character of the agave. So if you pick up your first glass, if you taste the Ocho, which is the first one I want you to look at. Let me, got my wee bottle. So Ocho, there's 2 tequilas that kind of introduced me to tequila, and I have them both here today, Ocho and Cali 23. And Ocho is created by a gentleman called Tom Estes with Carlos Camarena, who is one of sort of Mexico's star distillers. And Thomas actually really loves wine as well as tequila, and he's written an amazing book. Actually, if you ever want to read a great book, The Tequila Ambassador. He's just doing a 2nd edition at the moment. It's fantastic. And Thomas is a really inspirational man. I mean, the man, I've never seen someone love tequila quite so much, but he also likes wine. So he really wanted to capture this idea of a single estate. So you speak about the land in your tequilas, and he was one of the first people to release a single estate tequila. Now this is just his basic Ocho Blanco, so this is unrested. Now immediately when you put your nose to this, you just get that green capsicum pepper, which for me is 101 tequila. You know, this is tequila at its most pure basic form. You know, this is properly fresh, almost got a little mentholy note as well. I get a little coolness to it, but then there's this really lovely pretty fruit behind. You know, it's just got this lovely spice, and that's that agave speaking. And all of his agave comes from the highlands in Jalisco, and so you've got sort of high altitude, you've got a cooler climate, and you know, really comes through that sort of bright fruit that I was talking about from this area, really coming through in this. And he uses brick ovens for this, so it's cooked for about 48 hours, and then he uses a roller mill, and actually he ferments his first wine, low wine, in wooden tanks, which actually for me is good because you get all those natural yeasts sort of that line the tanks, and you get the influence of open fermentation. Again, you get that natural yeast. He actually uses proprietary yeast. Proprietary yeast means that he's using a yeast that is local to him, or one that he's propagated, but it's still controlled. So it's not as crazy as a wild yeast ferment. There's more control over it, which people sometimes want. And then this is in first in a stainless steel still, and then the second distillation in a pot still. Right, that's how we taste. What I love about tequila, when you have a really good tequila, there's so much flavor, so much flavor. It's really fresh, it's really pure, you get beautiful fruit again. But for me, that pepper just really pops out of this one. You know, it's got that lovely sort of black cracked pepper note, just really fresh, really lovely, smooth. I mean, the texture on that's fantastic, and I think that's something I always find on all of the Ocho tequilas, is really texturally they're fabulous. You know, they're really, that pot still's really coming out and giving roundness to the spirit, but really lovely, sort of nice heartwarming feel to it. A little bit almost on the finish, a little bit of fudge as well, which I actually haven't noticed. And you know, I'm like with all things, and we'll look at this when I come to the next one. Like, I like my spirit to breathe in the glass. I think, you know, it's that's why tequila shouldn't just be a shooter, because you don't taste it if you're just shooting it and then squirting lime in your mouth. You know, a good tequila should be sipped. Absolutely. You know, tequila is for enjoying and really getting into and letting it, the complexities of the spirit kind of work its way through. That really lovely long aftertaste as well, this one. Definitely heartwarming. I always say if I drink good tequila or a good mezcal, I don't get a hangover. Shouldn't really say that probably, because I'll get in trouble with the regulatory board. But hey, I just said it. As always, I say things and I get myself in trouble. There's a surprise. Right, so you see how fresh that one is, and how light and how just elegant and juicy. I mean, this is a really, really good one for cocktails. For me, I really like it to use. And I know we've got a couple of great cocktail guys on today, and I'm sure they'll be agreeing with me with that statement, because it is a really, really lovely Blanco. So Blanco, unaged, you know, that's pure, easy, fresh. So then what happened was, you know, people wanted aged spirits, you know, they want to create things where there's a bit of color to them. And so you started having two different styles. You have Reposado, which is an aged style of tequila. So that is 6 months minimum. And it's, for me, got like this tequila, you want to keep the flavor of the agave. And I think that's super important. So normally with Reposado, it's 6 to 12 months. It can be in a kind of good way, because actually you still have the flavor of the agave there, and I think that's super important. When you're aging in oak, you always want to have the flavor of your initial distillate coming through. And for me, that sort of 6 months just gives you that lovely little spice from the wood. And often they're using used American oak barrels because, of course, America, they can only use the barrels once when they're making bourbon. So, you get that sort of sweet vanilla tones from the American oak coming through, but only really, really, really gently. And for me, you just get that really nice, just, if you smell it, you get that pepper coming through of the agave spirit. But sorry, did I say 6 months on the Reposado? No, I meant 2 months minimum is the minimum. Sorry, my brain's going dead there. So it's 2 months minimum aging for Reposado. And then, so what you have here is like just that spice, but then behind it, you get this little tone of vanilla, you get a little nuttiness. And then for me, just a little wood spice. And when I say wood spice, I'm getting a little bit of clove, a little nutmeg, but it's really, really subtle. And, that for me, and this is from one of my second favorite producers, Cali 23. And it's an amazing woman called Sophie Debec who produces this. And Sophie, for me, is one of the most incredible women in the world. I think she's absolutely amazing. She was actually, I think it was a biochemist or something like that before. She's French originally. And then she went to produce, I think it was brandy or something in South Africa. She was a distiller down there for a bit, and then went to America and started working in a bar, and then actually ended up in Mexico. And she is just one of the most energetic and vibrant people you've ever met. And that's like coming from me, who's pretty energetic. But Sophie is just an incredible distiller. And I've always loved Cali 23 because I think they really get that oak and that agave balance in all of their aged tequilas. So have a little taste. So you see, you still have that pepper and that sort of greenness that you want in the tequila. I mean, I want to taste that. But then layered in there, you get this lovely sort of walnuts and that soft spice. And that spice is really staying with me. What's interesting with this one is I poured these out probably about 20 something minutes, no, maybe more than that, about half an hour ago. And what I found is the Cali 23 is just getting more spices and more intense as I kind of opens up and gets a little bit more air. I'm seeing some really lovely sort of fruit coming in there. And I think that's sort of one thing I really love about the Cali 23 range is again, that fruit. And she's again in the Highlands. And they very much actually, they use autoclave, I think, from them. Definitely it's a shorter process. So they use the autoclave, which is the sort of about 15 hours, I think they're baking it for. And then it's again pot still, and the Reposado is actually, this one's aged for 8 months. So, it's towards the higher end of a Reposado aging. Now, what's quite interesting in tequila and in mezcal, there's no maximum aging for each category. So you could call yourself a Reposado, even if you were aging 3 years. I mean, not that hopefully anyone would do that, but so you have a minimum age requirement, but not a maximum, which is quite a kind of interesting process. So you could blend in different ages and things. I don't know if people do that. So then if we look at the last one, this is a category that I often struggle with in tequila. And for me, it was probably more for the American market that they started producing añejos. I often find that with añejo, you really get too much wood character, and there's a lot of really, really bad añejos out there. And, for me, trying to find an añejo I like is hard. And normally when I'm doing buying, I taste sort of every day loads of different things. And always when it comes to the tequilas, I'm always like, oh God, it's añejo. I'm just going to get a mouthful of oak. But there are a couple of people that I think do a really, really, really good job, and Tapatio is one of them. Tapatio, Siete Leguas, I think does an amazing job. Fortaleza does a good job with their añejos. So there are people out doing really good things out there. So the minimum age requirement for an añejo is 12 months. And for me, that's when you start to see that kind of oak start overtaking. And even if you're using old barrels and things, still you're just going to get that power of oak. Now, Tapatio is again made by the same gentleman that produces Ocho, so Carlos Camarena. And this one, I'm a big fan of Tapatio. I was introduced to Tapatio about 10 years, a bit more ago. And I just immediately fell in love with it. And then I just wouldn't drink anything except Tapatio for a long time, just because I think it's just a really great little drink. And again, really good for sort of mixing and playing around with. But he uses brick ovens, Carlos, you know, we said in the first one, it's again that brick ovens, and it's 4 days in those ovens. So you really get some sort of really long, lovely, slow sort of cooking process. And he actually doubles the stills again in a copper pot. And this one's actually aged for 18 months. So, you know, this has got a little bit sort of longer than the minimum, but not too long. So, you know, when you smell this, actually you don't get wood straight away, which is what I do find in a lot of brands. I won't name the brands, don't worry. I have been known to be quite rude about products, but I think because this is on Facebook, I might just be careful because anyone can hear me. Whereas if I'm in a nice small room and it doesn't go outside the room, and if it does, I can just say, they're lying. But I am normally quite bad about naming and shaming, but I'll be well behaved for once in my life today. But you know, this one you don't. I still get that pepper. I still get that lovely fruit. And then there's just a little bit of the spice, you know, that wood spice actually from, if you move from say the Cali 23, and if you have 2 glasses, so I always like to go back and compare things, you know, yes, the wood's more prevalent, but I don't get the vanilla that I got from the Cali 23. I actually get on this one a little bit more of the spice from the wood. So potentially a little bit more kind of more sort of nuts, cinnamon. I almost get olives on this. I don't know where I'm getting olives from. I haven't got olives on this, but it's something I've just been like, oh, it's black olive. Now it's going to stick in my head that black olive, and that's all I'm going to ever be able to smell again on Tapatio. But really, really well balanced. And interesting enough, I didn't know this, but they use Jim Beam barrels to age the tequila. And what you notice immediately on the palate on this, yes, you have the spice, yes, you have the freshness, this really lovely cooling sensation as it goes in your mouth. But I hope you notice here, it's a lot drier. You know, those tannins from the wood are really coming through and kind of creating like a drying sensation on the palate. Whereas if you go back and taste the Ocho, you've just got sweetness and ripeness. Whereas this one, that drying character is coming through, and that's very much tannins from oak. So oak imparts flavor, but it also imparts texture to spirit, and that's really important to know. So, you know, if you do have a tequila that has been over oaked, you really just get wood and nothing else. Whereas this one, I think, because what actually Carlos does is he includes a lot of the heads and the tails in his tequilas, because he says he's got the process so down pat that he can, and so beautifully done that actually he can keep more of the heads and tails than you normally would. So you get a lot of flavor in his tequilas. And I think that's really helping with the oak balance. And it's really interesting because you have extra añejos as well, which are 3 years plus. And extra añejos for me, like there are none that I really, really like, except for Tapatio's, oh my goodness, now I can't even say it. Say it for me, Billy. Oh, I can't say it today. I've had too much to get it. Excelencia. There, got it. Excelencia, which is, I believe, 4 years in charred American, again, ex Jim Beam. And that one is like, you taste it, you're like, wow, what just happened there? I remember tasting it for the first time and just being like, I know it's tequila because I'm getting those tequila flavors, but it's almost like bourbon, it's almost like cognac. It was like, what is this that I'm tasting? But actually, I think because he's using that sort of sweetness from that Jim Beam barrel, it's just really just, it works. I don't know how he does it. And it's probably just because he includes more of the heads and the tails, so you're getting more weight and power, which actually, if you're putting anything into oak, you need something that's got a lot of character to it, because the oak's just going to dominate otherwise, you know. So hence why you wouldn't necessarily put Pinot Grigio as a grape into oak, because you just have really horrible wine. Whereas Chardonnay, which has a lot more weight and a lot more kind of intensity, can take it. So, you know, it's kind of the same thing in spirits. So we've got our tequila. So tequila, really simply, blue agave, cooked, distilled twice, and then can be aged or cannot be aged. So nice, simple. Yeah, what's complicated about that? Now, mezcal. I have my baseball cap here. Wasn't sure if I was allowed to wear it because I wasn't sure if I could say shit on camera. Oops, just did. I absolutely am obsessed with mezcal and actually agave spirits in general, but you know, I think these so we only have one mezcal here, and I'll explain that as we go along. The other two are agave distillates. But mezcal is just like, for me, the closest you're going to get to a wine in terms of there is so much character in them. And I'm still very much discovering mezcal, and I don't think I've, it's taken me 20 years to learn wine. So, I mean, God knows how long it's going to take me to learn mezcal. Because each village and terroir is different. And I actually want to read something to you because I actually think this encapsulates it beautifully. It's something that Dave Broom wrote for Cinco de Mayo. And if you go on the whiskeymanual.uk, thewhiskeymanual.uk, which is Dave Broom's website, it's definitely worth a read. It's in his local recent articles. And I think this is it. I think this just encapsulates mezcal for me. So I asked Dave yesterday if I could read it, and he said yes. The taste of each mezcal is the taste of the agave, the mezcalero, but also the community. If they don't like it, they won't buy it. Those flavors have been determined over generations. And I really like that because that for me is mezcal. Mezcal is local production. Okay, fine, you have the big guys that are doing their wormy thing, and just get rid of them. Just, if you see a worm in a bottle, do not buy it. That is like my rule. It's like I don't go to restaurants that show me pictures of the food unless it's Japanese. I have the same principle with mezcal. If you see the worm, run, because it is not proper mezcal. And the worm was originally, they used the worm. I'm all in favor of worm salt, and I've snacked on worm in my time, but not in a bottle. And for me, that this idea, this sense of the community, that's the sense of place is part of terroir as much as the soil and the landscape. And Billy always takes the piss out of me because I say terroir all the time. It's like my byword, terroir. Are you drinking mezcal tonic there? And I think it's definitely the people as much as the place that make a product what it is. And I think mezcal is a real perfect embodiment of that in spirits, in the same way as Claran and rum is. It's really about the heart and soul of the local community. And mezcal was very much the kind of the dirty little secret. And all tequilas are mezcal. It's simple. Tequila is a subset of mezcal. But I think they've sort of taken very, very different roads, and I'm super excited now to see that more mezcals are popping up all over the place, and we're seeing more variety out there. And I'm still trying to get my head around all the different varietals there are and what flavors they get. And I don't think I've done enough tasting to be really definitive to say, okay, if it's Tobayiche, it tastes like blah 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 blah. If it's Durango, it's going to taste like blah 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 blah. I'm not good enough at that yet. I'm not good enough at where the villages are and the states. There's 9 official states that can produce mezcal. So mezcal actually got its DO in 1994. Tequila got it in 1974. So that shows where the kind of production and scalability is in tequila, definitely. And the money was in tequila. But now, mezcal's got its DO, and there's been a lot of problems with that, because actually a lot of states that have historically been producing mezcal for years and years and years are not included in the DO, so can't call themselves mezcal. And 2 of the tequila, the products we're tasting today are actually, in theory, mezcal, but we can't call them mezcal. We have to call them Destilado de Agave. So it's the El Destilado range that we'll look at. But first, we're going to look at the coche, which is and this one is a tepazate. So one of the so I was saying that with tequila you have to use only blue Weber agave. This actually, when you're looking at mezcal, you can use whatever you want as long as they're agaves. and mainly 50, 55 of them. There's no one really knows how many people use, because actually what you find with mezcal is for a long time, it were all wild agaves they were using. So, you know, your man in the village would just go out and he would go to his local sort of area and just chop down the agave when it was ready to produce. So it was all very much wild. Now more and more, because mezcal is more popular, you're actually seeing some propagated and sort of grown agaves, especially things like Espadán, which is, because its high sugar levels, is really good for fermentation because you can get a lot of alcohol, whereas others aren't. So you don't see as much of the wild agave mezcals, but they're still very, very much definitely out there. What is actually interesting is right now, especially with tequila, because it's a monoculture, there's only one plant, they're actually worried that if there's a disease, as we've seen in Italy with olive trees, that they could actually cause a real problem for the communities, because, you know, they're so farmed, these blue agaves. And, you know, I'm sure you've seen the pictures of these beautiful red clay soils with like just rows and rows of these beautiful blue plants. But mezcal is very much more local, traditional. You know, they used to use anything to ferment. There's what you call Filipino still, which is essentially just a wooden sort of dugout canoe that's just sort of set on a fire and just fermented like that. I mean, it's insane, you know. And they used to ferment their juice in anything. You know, it's so sort of localized and so sort of traditional production. For me, I kind of look at it like tequila's the cognac and mezcal is the Armagnac, because it's so much more rustic and so much more characterful and, you know, so much more sexy. So what you have is they can use loads of different agave plants. Each village will have a really different flavor and taste. And then when they come to produce it, the real difference, and I think a lot of people, when they think about mezcal, they think about the smokiness. And that's often coming from the process. So in tequila, you're cooking in these autoclaves, and so it's steam, and even the brick ovens, steam. Whereas in mezcal, if I don't have a picture, I wish I did. I should have thought about that earlier. But what they do is they make these pits. It takes them a day to build these things, apparently, which is just insane. And at the bottom, they get the charcoal, and even the wood that they're using to make the charcoal can affect the flavor, the final flavor of the agave. So, you know, if you were using pine, for example, that's going to have a very different flavor from oak, because if you think about pine, you know, you've got a resinous kind of mentally note. And then they put things. Oh, the cat's here! Watch out. And then what they do is then they sort of protect the piña from the hot coals, by lining it with the agave plant. And then what they do is they build these sort of, from the biggest piñas to the smallest piñas up, and then they cover it with tarpaulin and then cover with earth, and then they leave them there for like 5 days just to cook. Yeah, that's insane. All that work just to cook something when you could whack it in the steam oven. Now some people the big producers are starting to use less exciting techniques, let's say. Whereas, you know, the small guys are still very, very much doing this method. And you know, like for me, it's like these ovens are just like where you get so much of that sort of smoky flavor and that sort of really intense flavors that you do get in mezcal, you know. And that's one thing you want to kind of have. You want to have even in ones that don't have a lot of smoke, you just want that hint of just something that's kind of got that little sort of dustiness. So you sort of get the piñas out again, and then again you crush them again using either Tahona with the horse. Some people use John Deere tractors now, which is a lot more effective than using a horse, kinder on the horse. And then they can chop them with mallets, these big mallets. The really kind of small producers would do that. I can imagine that is absolutely backbreaking work. Or again, that you can use almost like a wood chipper, which the government kind of introduced, but a lot of mezcal people don't want to use. So Alipus actually did a test where they tried making mezcal from the wood chipper and then from the normal Tahona, and then they gave it to loads of people in the area to taste. No one liked the one from the wood chipper, which I think is super interesting. That actually even something as you think would be so simple, how can that affect the flavor? Well, you know, think about it. If you press something really hard, you're going to get harshness from it. If you do something really gently and really naturally and with less pressure, you know, you're going to get something more beautiful. So then, like they do in tequila, they make their first fermentation to get your low wine. And this is often done with natural yeast. And I said natural yeast is just the most sexy thing in the planet. And that's because you have so many different yeasts. You know, they're all from the area. Like they could be coming from the plant, they could be coming from the stills, they could be coming from the vat tubs. And that just all those different yeasts which are acting on the liquid all contribute different flavors. So, you know, if you look at yeast, and people are now producing yeast to do different things. So, for example, in when you're making Sauvignon Blanc in potentially New Zealand, you can actually pick a yeast to lift more grapefruit flavors out of your wine. You know, that's how much yeast affect flavor, because every type of yeast will give you different flavors or different properties, or help you ferment faster, or what have you. So you know, yeast is so fundamental, because what you're doing is you're taking anything, that wine, that base sort of brew that you created from that first fermentation, that is where you're going to get all your flavors. It's going to just be amplified by distillation, because basically what distillation is doing is just concentrating. So you're concentrating any flavors you produce in the first place, and that's why yeast is just so cool, because all those different flavors you're getting from the natural yeast, and then you'll get your main yeast sort of taking over, your sort of Saccharomyces. But super interesting, you know, that kind of influence that the different yeasts are giving. And some people use proprietary yeast now, some people probably the big guys. Again, not slagging off the big guys, I'm just saying that they take shortcuts. So therefore maybe their tequilas and mezcals are not as exciting sometimes. Billy's giving me shaking his head and running away. he's gonna mute me in a minute. So once you got your first fermentation, then they go into, and actually what's interesting about the first fermentation, they do it in all manner of different things. So it could be clay pots, it could be plastic, it could be animal hide. You know, in all of this is going to add to the flavors of the final distillate as well. You know, if you're fermenting something in an animal hide, how can you not take a flavor? You know, think of leather. Leather's going to give you flavor. It smells. You know, of course it is. So all these sort of different things are just going to add to that complexity of the mezcal at the end. So you've got your first fermentation, and then it's going to go into still. Now, again, with mezcal, fill your boots with what kind of things you're going to distill in. So you could do it in a copper pot still, you could do it in a stainless steel still, you could do it in a clay still, which is just insane. And what's really, really interesting when you have mezcal that's made in a clay still, you really get this earthiness to it, and you can taste it. Like the other day, I was like, I tasted something blind, and I was like, is this mezcal aged in that's been fermented in a clay still? I didn't know. Bam. You just, that character was there, you know. And that's for me what terroir is. Can you taste where it's made and how it's made? If you can, you have terroir. So simple. And you know, so you can use the clay, you can, I mean, there's so many different things you can use for distillation, and it just, all of these things imbue the character into the spirits. And again, you know, like you might have single distillation, might double distillation. And again, when we go to the aging, it's the same rules as for mezcal, tequila. So 2 years for 2 months for repo, and then 12 months plus for añejo. So should we taste? This is where I get very happy. Now, the one thing I want when I put my nose into a glass of mezcal is I want that kind of greenness and that fruit. And you know, if we look at this one, so you smell this one, I don't get a lot of smoke to it. You know, people look at that and they'll be like, okay, this is a mezcal, but why isn't it not whacking sort of me with a sort of smoky beast? You know, in a funny way, you can almost look at mezcal as being the Isla of tequila or agave, because you do have that sort of Marmite sensation from people. But again, I think it's like anything, you know, if you go to Isla and you drink, say, Bunnahabhain, it may not be smoky, you know? So why would all mezcal be smoky? And this one definitely isn't. So these guys I really like. They, you know, they do a whole load of different styles, and they're really focusing on single village, single agave plant. And this one comes from San Balthazar. And the agave here, it's like, that's Tapatio. The Tapatio, which is the name on the wee bit underneath. Sorry, my finger is totally covering that. That's the type of agave plant. These are aged, like they're not harvested for 12 to 15 years. I mean, that's a hell of a long time to wait for a plant, you know, and just think of how much character it's taking. And for me, it's just got this really, really beautiful fruit. It's almost got sort of tropical notes to it. So you get sort of pineapple and peach, and but still the sort of greenness. And what they're looking at now in mezcal, when they created the DO, they created two. So you have mezcal as a straight classification, and then you have artisanal and you have ancient. And basically, if you see artisanal on the label, it means it has to be produced in a sort of the more kind of older ways. So using the traditional methods of the local varietals. It has to be a 100% agave. It needs to be distilled in sort of, it can be used distilling in the old ways, but it can't be used doing modern distillation techniques. You can use proprietary natural. So it's kind of your artisanal ones, think of your mixture between your old and your new school. So there is sort of, you're allowed to use some modern techniques, but not a lot. Whereas with the other ones, ancestral, sorry, Billy's putting up a little thing for me. Did I say ancient? I can't even remember. So your ancestral ones, you very, very much, it's all about kind of the very old school methods of making mezcal. So how it was in the, you know, when they started making mezcal. You can't use any modern methods. So, you know, wild yeast have to be used, and you could use the fermentation vessels, could be sort of the animal hide and things like that. You can't use any of those modern methods that you do now. This is actually classed as artisanal. So, you know, only using the older style methods. Still using a horse to pull their tahona, poor horse, but I'm sure he's well taken care of. And they use wooden vats for their fermentation, and then it's classic sort of distillation. But I also get this really sort of almost like a candied note to this. Let's have a little taste. So mezcal makes you happy. I love mezcal. I could just stop here now and we could just have a little chat and sort of shoot the breeze. You know, who cares? It just tastes good. But look at the fruit there. The fruit's fantastic. You know, this is properly like popping with sort of tropical fruits. And again, I get a little pear in there. I get some sort of herbs. I get a little kind of band-aid. I always call it sort of band-aid, which is sort of like not TCP, but you know, if you kind of open a band-aid package and you smell it, everyone go and open a band-aid package. Oh, hold on, is it band-aid or plaster in this country? Plaster.
Either, it's fine, don't worry.
Okay, plaster. And smell it. You'll see what I mean. I mean, like I think most people don't go around smelling band-aids, but clearly I do. But you just have that little bit, and that's that sort of savory character. And I think with mezcal, you know, tequila is very simple and fresh, and it's all about sort of capsicum and pepper and spice. Whereas mezcal always has this sort of umami, that sort of sweet, savory kind of funk to it, which is what I absolutely love. So, you know, these guys are doing a really, really great job, and they do a whole range. I think we have about 10 of their mezcals on site at the moment. So if you really want to taste different sort of varietals and villages, they're a really good place to go. And actually, sort of production of sort of the single varietal and the single village was very much started by Del Maguey. They were the first people to really, really hear that on an international scene. And still to this day, they have some of the best tequilas. I mean, I love their basic Vida and all the way to their different villages. I think they're really, really fantastic brand. And you can never get enough of them, which is the only slightly annoying thing. Right, so if you then, let's do the Espadin. So this is the El Destilado. Now this range came out last year, and it's done by two really dear friends of mine, Michael and Marcis, who are the people behind Sager and Wild and Fair. So when we are back in action and open, get yourselves down there, because they are really, really great restaurants. So Michael's actually started off as a sommelier slash bartender. He's really, really into his wine. And I always think it's quite interesting that people that are into their wine actually really like mezcal, and it makes sense. You know, to me, it's going back to that idea of terroir and that sense of that sort of cultural heritage of and small scale production and things. And really great wine restaurant, nice food, fare is fabulous. Marcus is an amazing cocktail bartender. He's absolutely wonderful. So get yourselves down there because they're really, really great guys, and we want to support them after this is all over, because the bars will need our support, people. So let's do the Espadin. So Espadin, as I said before, is one of the sort of more popular, I was about to say grapes, agave plants for production of mezcal. I mean, as I said, these are not mezcals because they're outside. And what Marcus and Michael wanted to do was they wanted to actually bring a lot of these ones that should be able to be called mezcals but can't because they're in the wrong place to the market and really hero them, because they're saying, you know, these guys are producing absolutely fantastic liquid, but they, you know, there's nothing to kind of pull them all together. So they created the brand in order to be able to do this. And, you know, straight away on this one, it's so different. Yeah, you couldn't get two more different smells. This one for me is all about caramel and sort of a little bit of kind of more sort of apple fruit, you know, there's fruit there, but it's super subtle. It's got this almost like kind of, when I say a saline character, you can't really smell salt at all, but you know, if you think about sort of the ocean or even something like wet stones, I really get that coming through. But just this little lick of kind of caramel that just sits on top of this. And what I love about the El Estolano range is on the label, they're very transparent. It's all about transparency. And so you know exactly who the producer is, the name of the guy that distilled it. You can see how they distilled it, the fermentation time, the agave plant, you know, everything's really detailed on the label. So it's super helpful for me when I'm doing a tasting because it's all there in front of me and I don't need to do any research, which is my kind of tasting. But yeah, you know, it's just got to open up this one as you kind of get it in the glass. And again, you know, as I say, I really think things like spirits, we don't leave in the glass long enough to breathe. And it's so important to do that because you're just going to get more and more from the products. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? Because I feel like I've been talking a lot. I'm actually losing my voice, which is slightly scary. My partner will be very happy about that tonight when I can't talk. But it's got this lovely savory character. Now, this one actually is, so I'm going to read my notes, is 6 to 8 years, the agave plant, and it's semi-cultured, which means basically they've got some that are natural and some that are harvested, or grown. 120 hours cooking. That's quite a lot of cooking time, if you think about it. And they use the Tejoda with the horse. And 240 hours fermenting. No, sorry, 240. Yeah, 240 hours fermenting in plastic. Now, if I go back and then I look at that, actually, do I get something from that plastic? I don't know. You know, it's got to imbue something into the spirit at the end. And then this one is also distilled in a copper spot. Right. Let's have a taste. So different. Look at the texture. It almost has tannin. I mean, that's crazy. Where's that tannin coming from? This is not aged in wood. Where's the tannin coming from? That's got to be coming from the agave. And I think with Espadin, actually what I've noticed is that you do get this lovely fruit from Espadin, and there's always just this really easy drinking quality to it. Again, you've got this lovely, slightly medicinal finish, a little bit of nuttiness there, you know, that cooling menthol element. This is just, I could just drink this all day. I mean, it's just so kind of deliciously textural. And for me, I think we spend a lot of time talking about flavors in spirits, but we don't often talk about texture. But for me, texture is as important. You know, when I'm tasting something that's got great texture, it's just a totally different experience than something that just kind of attacks your palate and is gone. But really lovely sort of, it's again, that sweet, savory balance. And again, yeah, oh, question. I see a question. Go for it, Billy.
Hey Don, I've got a question from Matt who's in the Zoom room. So give me a second
Hey,
to
Matt.
unmute him, and then he'll be able to do the
Okay.
asking himself. There you go, Matt.
Hey,
Hey.
I was just thinking, I think I'm probably jumping ahead, but the aging of mezcal, when it comes to the ancestral and the artisanal and stuff like that denominations, is there any rules on aging mezcal with Reposado, Anejo, or?
There's definitely rules for mezcal general, so it's the same as tequila, so 2 years, and then I think it's 100 liters for a reposado barrel maximum, and then añejo is something like it's that 12 months with, I think it's 600 liter barrels, same.
Oh gosh,
amazing.
What are your views on it?
Aged mezcal, similar to my views on aged Claran. To be honest, I have had some good ones, like Illegal. I think their aged ones are delicious. And again, it's that balance. I mean, the good thing with mezcal is there's a little bit more character, so actually it can take the wood better. I prefer my mezcal just as it is, straight, fresh, beautiful. I mean, you have to rest mezcal. I think it's 12 months you have to rest it in glass. So you get that kind of marrying time, or that sort of resting time, which I think even for a white spirit is really, really important, because it's like anything, you give it a little bit of time to kind of let it get to it, familiar with itself, and it's just going to be better. But I don't know about whether the ancestral and the artisanal have rules around actually if they can age or not. I'm not 100% sure. Billy, do you know the answer?
Yeah, the ancestral, artisanal, and regular mezcal bit, that doesn't have any effect on the aging regs. The aging regs are across the whole of mezcal. The artisanal stuff, that's just the production up to the point of aging.
Thank you, Billy.
Perfect.
But yeah, I mean, like for me, I prefer my mezcal unaged. Just because I love the character, it's just so much better. Just I want to taste the terroir. But yeah, as I said, Illegal, I think does a really good job. If you're going to have an aged tequila, for me, they're probably the mezcal. Sorry, they're probably the best.
Thank you.
Perfect. Good to see you. Anyway, right, let's go to the last one. So the last one we're going to try is the Madracuche. Now, one thing that's very about mezcal is very localized. So in different states, you can have the same agave plant but called 900 different things, which I love, because it's the same in Spain. You have garnacha and they call it 20 different things. So I get totally confused what's what. So when I chose this one, I was like, hold on a minute. Have I chosen two the same? No, I'm okay. I'm safe. So this is Madracuche. And this one is actually from San Isidro. It's 144 hours and it's cooking. And actually they use mesquite oak, which I think imbues a little kind of almost a sappiness to the mezcal itself. Again, it's milled with a tahona and pine cypress fermentation vat. So again, you've got this kind of influence of this sort of herbaceous quality coming through in what they're actually doing. And, it's just like, for me, on the nose on this is copper pot as well. Sorry. This is a totally different. Again, I've chosen 3 mezcals that are not really smoky. And I don't know if I did that deliberately just to kind of show that mezcal is not just about smoke. I don't really know what my thought process was, but I think, I kind of wanted to show you how much fruit is in mezcal. So it's not just smoke and more smoke. But on the nose on this, when I first picked this up, I got watermelon, which I was like, where did that come from? But you get this little hint again of that slightly medicinal band-aidy kind of note again. It's got this meatiness to it. This is like pulled pork. You've got that sort of sweet meat. Definitely that sort of spice coming through there. Yeah, I love the comment from someone, if these aren't smoky, I'm terrified of a smoky mezcal. They do definitely have a little hint of smoke there. So don't worry that, you can have ones that are like super smoke bombs, which I definitely haven't given today. But yeah, no, mezcal should always have a little hint of smoke. You should always have that just lying in the background, whatever. But no, these are definitely not as smoky as some. There are some really beastie kind of almost what I would say peat monsters out there. But this one's got this really lovely sort of hint of vanilla. It's got almost a herbaceous character. I get bay leaves, I get sage. This for me is a really, like I keep going back to this one and thinking about this one and thinking about this. And I really, really like this one. That's how we taste. Mm. And again, this is actually, I think when you taste this one, this is where you find the smoke a little bit more. It's super sweet. There's just this really lovely sort of sappiness to it. It's got this kind of, oh my goodness, I could just drink that one all day. This cooling menthol element, but this sort of ripe peach, almost if you have kind of a peach berry kind of pudding, and then you've got this sort of medicinal kind of smoky kind of meatiness behind it. And, this is sort of where you get that funk in mezcal that I absolutely love, like for me, it's that slightly kind of, I think for me, it's that kind of sort of torture kind of pleasure element, that pain and pleasure balance. And mezcal does it so well. It's like drinking a great Nebbiolo, Nebbiolo should hurt if it's good. And, mezcal for me should just make you sort of sit up and listen. And, I think this one does that super beautifully. And you've got, again, that sort of, it travels around your palate quite interestingly. It's almost kind of waves of flavor coming through. But just so much there. It's almost got a cheesiness to it as well, a little kind of blue cheese funk, which I kind of like in my drinks, clearly. And as it goes to your palate, you kind of, first you get the fruit. In the beginning, I get that kind of watermelon peach. And then as it goes through, I'm getting that cooling kind of herbaceous character coming through, that sort of rosemary, that thyme. And then on the finish, you just get that lovely sort of slight lick of smoke. And then that menthol just kind of whooshes through. And, I guess what I kind of want to say when we're sort of talking about all these different styles is there's so many different styles of mezcal. There's so many different styles of tequila. But mezcal for me really is the one that's got the most complexity. I mean, like a great tequila is a great tequila. I'm not, I love tequila, but there's something about mezcal, and I think it is definitely the sense of people, place, and just the kind of rawness of the production and the naturalness of the production. There's an amazing rum guy called Luca Gargano, and he is a little crazy. But he is very much about some naturalness. And we don't really talk about natural spirits at all. You hear the sort of words being bandied about with wine, natural wine, blah, blah, blah. But I think, when you do taste a spirit that is in its essence quite naturally produced and really sort of simply produced, actually, whether it's a whiskey, a vodka, or something like an agave spirit, there's just this complexity there, which I just think is so interesting and so beautiful. And I hope today that we've dispelled the myths about worms and about like shots of tequila. And, like tequila's what I think I love about tequila. It's such a versatile spirit. You can drink it neat. You have like your kind of light, crisp, fresh sort of tequila styles to your rich, intense añejos. So if you're a kind of whiskey drinker or cognac drinker, you could drink in a reposado quite happily. If you like your funky rums, you could drink a mezcal. Or, if you like your funky wines, you could drink a mezcal. So, and then also on top of that, I mean, who doesn't love a margarita? I mean, like, for God's sakes, if you don't like margarita, get out of town, because really, and a Tommy's margarita is my favorite thing. Daiquiris and Tommy's margaritas, I mean, it's basically good for you because it's a lot of lime, vitamin C and all that. I'm sure that's good for coronavirus. But no, I'm just holding my hand up to say that was a lie. Vitamin C is not anything to do with coronavirus as far as I know, before everyone starts buying limes and everything, as well as tonic water, which contains quinine, but it is not a cure for coronavirus. Did you hear that, Billy? I said not a cure for coronavirus. So, I think you can use it so many ways. You can use it in cocktails, you can use it in a long drink, tequila tonic, mezcal tonic. it's delicious. Mezcal tonic, much better than tequila tonic. But, you know, you've got palomas. I mean, I love palomas. And all you need, so 3 cents, do a really good pink grapefruit soda, which is absolutely delicious with tequila or mezcal. I've been drinking quite a lot of that. Actually, it's the one thing I did have in my fridge, but I think I drank it the other day. So, you know, like, go away, play with them. You know, margarita is super simple to make. You know, you don't need a blender to make a frozen margarita. You can just squeeze your limes and hey, here you go. And it's just worth it. There's such a rich history around tequila and mezcal. It's really interesting. If you want to read some great books, actually Tom Bartram, who is like the Mr. Tequila knowledge, he's amazing. If you ever get to do a tasting with him, or Gabby, they're amazing people to listen to talking about tequila. But yeah, the Tequila Dictionary is absolutely fantastic. Mezcal Experience by Tom Bullock, and Tom is really interesting. He's a DJ, and he's super crazy. I absolutely adore him. And he then just like discovered tequila, discovered mezcal, and he's written a really beautiful book on it. And of course, Tom's Tequila and Mezcal, which is at the moment, Billy lent me this because I lost my copy, but he's actually just producing a new book now. So hopefully it'll be out in the next couple of months, which should be great because it's a really, really interesting book. But there's so many amazing people. What kind of tonic? Ooh. What kind of tonic? I've just read another comment, which I won't read out in public. What kind of tonic? For me, you know, something that's quite light. I prefer something that's not got too much sweetness, because I think for me, tequila and mezcal have their own natural sweetness. So something that's a little bit less. I mean, Fever Tree is always a good bet. It's simple. Actually, even London Essence, just because they're a little lighter, would work really nicely. And they do some sort of flavored ones. I even think their rosemary one could be quite interesting. I've not tried mixing it yet. Actually, we should support London Essence at the moment because they're donating 10% of all the profits to charity, to the Drinks Trust, which is protecting our industry. So definitely want to support there. But yeah, you know, I think really, really nice, something not too sweet works best for me. You know, I'm even starting to put soda in everything because I'm kind of turning away from tonic quite a bit. Probably because I hate gin. What is the best tequila for a margarita? Oh, that's a good question. I might bring Matt back in on this one. I mean, as I said, I really like using Ocho. I really like using Tapatio because I think they're really just good basic tequilas. Cali again, really, really good tequila. If you want to kind of premiumize a bit, I mean, I love Siete Leguas. I think they're a really, really nice tequila brand. One sadly you don't see enough of anymore. But you know, something like that makes a really, really nice margarita. But I'm a super simple girl, like a lovely Blanco from either Ocho, Calais, or Tapatio. For me, job done. Matt, do you have any others that you like?
If you like your margaritas really, really hefty, Tapatio do a 110.
Yeah,
that's stunning. Yeah, really, really good. And then for something that's a lot more basic and a lot more light, Aquariva.
Yeah, Aquariva is a really easy style.
It's so easy.
And actually her agave syrup is really good for Tommies. Yeah. Also, I quite like using honey in my Tommies, but I really like honey. I'm
going to steal that.
Just so you know, I am the worst cocktail bartender in the planet. So maybe don't listen to me, because there's a reason I go to bars, and it's because people make much better drinks than me. Oh. She says, but now in quarantine, I'm having to get better. So I'm getting very experimental now with everything, like playing around with the different types of sugar syrup I'm using. And I mean, my daiquiri production right now is like on fire. I'm like, yeah, no, if it's a molasses-based rum, I'm only going to use brown sugar for my sugar syrup. So I've turned into a bit of a cocktail geek experimenter, but I think I'm definitely going to need to do a week in a bar somewhere after this is all over, so someone can actually teach me properly, because I really much prefer when someone else makes them for me. Got another question here. What do I need to look for to find the smokier mezcal? Is there a term or specific makes? So Not really. It's a little bit kind of experimentation. There are some stuff. So basically, if they're sort of wood fired and you get some of that sort of really smoky element. So some of the El Destilado range, best thing to do is go onto the website, so the Whiskey Exchange, and just have a look at our tasting notes, because we're pretty specific if it's quite smoky and things. We are actually, as soon as I get my ass in gear, which hopefully won't be too long, I want to do something similar that we've done with rum for mezcal. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a flavor map or a flavor character for mezcal and tequila. So I'm working on that at the moment. I've just come up with the terms recently. I just need to kind of really think, have I got it right? But I'm pretty sure I want to have 6 flavor camps. And so it'll be a lot easier when you're kind of navigating mezcal to kind of really kind of find the style that you like, and especially if you do like something smokier. So I'm just looking at the website right now, kind of the El Destilado range is really good. Del Maguey is, I always find, quite smoky. All of their styles have a lot of smoke to them. So I would say if you do want to start with a smoky style, try the Vida or any of the Del Magueys, because they definitely have a lot more kind of smoke to them as a total style. But yeah, usually it's a lot to do with the plant. Some tend to have sort of more smoky characters coming through, and it's also about the kind of distillation. I think, yeah, the Vida, I think someone's showing a bottle of Vida, which is great. Billy, can we highlight some? Perfect. Can everyone see that? There we go. It's the Pechuga. So Pechuga is a really interesting style of mezcal. So what they do is, they traditionally used to do it for fiestas and family parties, is that they have their mezcal and then they hang a chicken over it, and they often put spices and stuff actually in the mezcal, and then they heat it, and the steam from the mezcal heating up actually goes into the chicken, and you get kind of chickeny, well, not really chickeny flavors. You do get a meatiness to it. I don't think you really get. They've done an Iberico one as well, which is pretty mental. But it's a really specific style of mezcal that's sort of become quite popular in recent years. So what, any other questions here? Any chance we could get links for the tequilas discussed? No problems, Billy. I'm sure we'll be on that in about 2.5 seconds. Any other questions? I'm really bad at this. Is it okay to say all tequila is mezcal, but not mezcal is tequila? No, so mezcal is definitely not tequila. So mezcal is mezcal, but tequila is a type of mezcal in theory, even though tequila is actually its own separate category from the DO, and it's blue agave based. But yeah, technically, if you kind of look at it, mezcal, tequila, everything started out as agave spirits. So, you did have that kind of separation, and mezcal was what people were really kind of producing back then in the day. And then tequila kind of went on its own subset. But no, technically you should keep tequila and mezcal as separate categories. Did you wave, Billy, or did you have a question, or no? Sorry. Are any of them vegetarian, vegan? Ooh, the Pechuga, definitely not. Everything else is. So as long as you don't see Pechuga or the Iberico ones, you're safe, because essentially they don't use anything in terms of fining and filtration like they do like eggs or anything like that. The only ones you might be, if it's been aged in animal skin, but then that's really one that you don't see that often. So you might just want to check whether how they were fermented, but the rest, as far as I'm aware, should be absolutely no animal products used in the making of it. I'm trying to think. No, nothing as far as I'm aware, except, as I said, this is the Pechuga style. Do you have any clay pot still mezcal on your website? Yes, absolutely. So if you look at the El Destilado range, there is definitely a couple in there. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones are, but it'll say really clearly on the label, so you can check. But yeah, they're really, really interesting, the clay ones. I really, really like them. They're super interesting to taste. Anything else? Any other questions? I think, is that it? Have I missed anything? No? Perfect. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking this beautiful Saturday night to spend with me and Billy. Always much appreciated, and thank you for being such a great audience with such awesome questions. Really good. Absolutely, thank you so much for supporting us. And as I say, when this is all over, go out into the bars, try mezcal, because we need to support these guys when we come back from all of this craziness. But yeah, enjoy your weekend, your bank holiday weekend, and cheers. Thank you. I'm going to drink all my mezcal now.